The dignitaries to come on the dais. Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, VSM, Executive Director of the National Institute of Disaster Management. Shri Kamal Kishore, Member, National Disaster Authority. Dr. Nagesh Kumar, Director, South and Southwest Asia Office of UNSCAP India. Indeed, it's a great moment that we have assembled here to discuss major issues regarding the vulnerabilities in the South Asia Pacific, and drawing our way forward lessons that how we would be re-strategizing our whole thing for disaster risk reduction. And for that, we have this gathering today where representatives who have been dealing with the subjects for long, representing their different organizations, and also committed themselves to the cause of disaster risk reduction. So we have not called the big gathering for this moment, and definitely we believed in the quality discussion. So maximum 35 to 40 or 50 dignitaries would be here, along with the faculty of the National Institute of Disaster Management. We have senior most person sitting here also. Professor V.K. Sharma is the Honorable Vice Chairman of the Sikkim State Disaster Authority. Mr. Parvez Hayat and all the dignitaries sitting here representing different organizations. The idea is to discuss one very, very important report which UNSCAP has come up with, is Asia Pacific Disaster Vulnerability, the Disaster Riskscape and Pathways for Resilience, Inclusion and Empowerment. And for that, we request Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, VSM, Executive Director of the National Institute of Disaster Management, to formally welcome the guest and all the delegates sitting here. Mr. Manoj Kumar Bindal, please.
Jai Hind to everyone. I welcome each and every one of you to this workshop on Asia Pacific Disaster Vulnerability, the Disaster Riskscape and Pathways for Resilience, Inclusion and Empowerment. I give a special welcome to Professor Vinod Kumar Sharma, who's sitting right in front, Mr. Kamal Kishore, Member NDMA, and Dr. Nagesh Kumar, UNSCAP Director. Asia Pacific nations, as we all know, they experience more natural disasters than any other region in the world. So vulnerability to the disaster is not solely a matter of where we live, but is also depends on the way we live. Many Asia Pacific nations share common characteristics such as large growing population with a high proportion of people living below poverty line. Poorer villages and farms near coastal regions often lack resources, and they lack the adequate capacity to build protection for themselves, like sea defenses, for example, thereby leaving them exposed to monsoon rains, storms, cyclones, and all other related calamities. strong winds, flooding not only destroy homes, livestock and crop, but also pollute the freshwater supplies and also many a times cut off the aid that is coming to them. In addition, industrialization is driving high concentration of people to live in a badly constructed and crowded cities. Rapid urbanization and inadequate planning makes densely populated urban areas more vulnerable, particularly near coastal regions and larger river basins. This region also suffers from high rates of environmental degradation. In places, logging and land clearance for farming activities have caused dramatic desertification and deforestation. Due to this loss of tree cover and depleting natural protection, there is an increased risk of landslides. While climate change is increasing the threat from extreme weather events, much is being done to remedy the same. Aid agencies, governments, and regional bodies are working to improve the local disaster response and their capabilities.
Thank you very much, sir, for highlighting major issues relating to long-term solutions, especially in the context of Asia and the South Asia, and how we are going to attain sustainability with the ecosystem-based approach, and strengthening of governance for every kinds of work which we need to take in future, and our interdependence on the countries, that is much more important when we talk about disaster beyond borders. So I request now Dr. Nagesh Kumar, Director South and Southwest Asia Office of UNESCAP, to deliberate upon the report on Asia Pacific disaster vulnerability, the Disaster Riskscape and Pathways for Resilience, Inclusion and Empowerment. And this would be a longer presentation so that everybody would get a hang of it, that what is all about, and then we request after that for a special address to member National Disaster Authority, Mr. Kamal Kishore, to have his reflection on the report. So Dr. Nagesh Kumar.
Thank you, Professor Santosh Kumar. The very distinguished participants of this meeting, including Professor V.K. Sharma, Mr. Kamal Kishore, the Executive Director and host of this meeting, Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, VSM, Executive Director of NIDM, and all the very distinguished participants, good morning. It's a privilege to have this opportunity to share some highlights of this latest SCAP report. It was actually launched yesterday in Bangkok, and it was presented by our Undersecretary General, Dr. Armida Alejabana, to the press. But we thought that the message of this report is very, very relevant for this sub-region of South Asia and India in particular. As we know, we are just recovering from very devastating floods in many parts of the country, huge loss of lives and property, and reversal of development gains. You build so much of infrastructure after spending so many resources and effort, and then floods and droughts and earthquakes destroy them in one moment. So this is what is going on successively, and the incidence of these disasters and their intensity is increasing in Asia, and particularly in this part where we are living through. So this report has some key messages which are highly relevant for this sub-region. So, this year's edition of this report has focused on the social consequences of these disasters, and it has also gone beyond the traditional measurement of the risks by including slow onset disasters like droughts, which has led to a huge increase in the estimation of risks. So as we will go through, I will just present some highlights of this report. The executive summary, a detailed executive summary has been circulated. You have a copy of that, and the more detailed full version is on the website of UNESCAP. We could not get the copies of the full report because it's a bulky document, but you can freely download it, and if you experience any difficulty in downloading it, please do let us know. We will be able to share a link or a PDF file.
A very good morning to everyone. It was a very interesting presentation of the report, the Asia Pacific Disaster Report. A reiteration of some of the messages we've heard before, but also some new ideas, some new insights, some new suggested lines of action to reduce risks. So I will talk very briefly a little bit about some of the principal challenges and focus largely on how do we make our infrastructure resilient. I will start by referring to one of the first slides that Dr. Nagesh presented, where he showed Asia Pacific and rest of the world and how economic losses as a percentage of GDP are rising in the Asia Pacific, whereas they are more or less flat in rest of the world. There is a bad news in it, but there is also good news in it. The good news in it is that it's also the fastest growing region in the world. So we have more assets, we are creating more assets, and if you create more assets, you also are going to lose some of those assets if you don't build that properly. So this trend is a trend, but a trend does not have to become our destiny. The trend can be arrested and reversed. Building new assets, expanding our economy. In our country, our Prime Minister is talking about turning India into a $5 trillion economy. That cannot be done without making investments in infrastructure. And it's not just the aggregate size of the economy, but also for poverty reduction. There is, when infrastructure assets are created, they create opportunities for people and they help reduce poverty. Where you have infrastructure deficit, you have high incidence of poverty as well. So countries like India, China, Indonesia, I would say Turkey, are in basically an infrastructure building spree. They have unlimited thirst for investment in infrastructure. To give you some figures for our own country, if you use 2016 as the benchmark year, the benchmark year that the SCAP report also uses, and compare 2016 with 2025, just 10 years, the length of metro network will be 6 times of what we had in 2016 in 2025. These are not projections, these are projects which are actually underway right now. This is not a theoretical possibility, it is going to happen. Our energy production will be 1.5 times or more. Our national road network will also increase dramatically. Before you finish talking this morning, India would have built 20 kilometers of national highway somewhere in the country. So that is the pace at all of these assets are growing. 10 years ago or maybe 15 years ago, there were 20 airports in the country. 20 years from now, there will be 200. And all of this is going to fundamentally change the landscape of the country, and hence the word that is used in the report, the riskscape of the country. And the new frontier is really making all of this better, making all of this more resilient. There are huge challenges in making that happen. In the last 3 years, we've had 3 new airports, brand new airports, go underwater. Chennai, if you look at Chennai airport pictures from 2015 November, those planes look like seaplanes. Kochi is particularly ironical because Kochi has been affected twice. It was affected in this season as well. And Kochi airport, when it was opened, it took pride in the fact that it is 100% on renewables. And guess what? All the solar panels went underwater. So, you solve one problem and you create another. Bhubaneswar airport, the pictures from Cyclone Fani are really horrifying, and this is in a situation where it is ironical, our colleagues from IMD are here. The anemometer, which is supposed to record the highest wind speed itself, was blown away, so we actually don't know what was the wind speed. It's a little bit embarrassing. But models that sort of look at what must have been the wind speed there indicate that the wind speed did not exceed the design wind speed. So it's not like you designed for 200 kilometer per hour and the wind speed was 250 or 205. It wasn't like that. So this is happening when the wind speeds, the hazards are well within the design limit. So this is what is happening to the infrastructure, and I've just given you a few examples. There are examples everywhere. There are examples not just for big infrastructure. We have pedestrian bridges crossing left, right and center. So this is the situation we have, and we really need to address it in a very comprehensive manner. It is a very difficult thing to do. There are 3 things which basically make this whole thing very difficult. One is the pace of growth itself. In the last 15 years, we have built something like 500,000 mobile telecommunication towers. None of them there are no national standards for mobile towers. There are general design standards, engineering standards for those kinds of structures. So there is no differentiation between how a mobile tower is built in Odisha versus how it is built in Himachal Pradesh. In some cases, these towers are on our houses. People rent out their buildings so they make the house vulnerable. The house itself is quite vulnerable. It's just basically, it's really a very, very poor situation.
The heavy rainfall event of the monsoon season, mostly in monsoon season, and as and when cyclone crosses also, at that time also we experience very severe that type of heavy rainfall and associated flood that will be there. So this flood also you might have observed this current monsoon season itself. Last year the heavy extreme rainfall event as well as flood was mostly some pockets. It was especially Kerala flood was one of the major thing. Whereas this year the flood has taken up a toll in this year, and it was taking turn northeast India, and then it was coming to eastern part of that Bihar and all, and then coming to Maharashtra, then Gujarat, even Kerala, all these areas. And again it is continuing also, and central parts of the country also was getting lot of flood this year. This is the major thing. Other than that, we will agree that thunderstorms also are taking a toll. And it is also becoming the deadliest nowadays. So that is also there. And there is one more is the silent killer, that is heat waves. Heat waves are also taking lot of toll. This year also there had been lot of casualties. And heat wave in this year, if you are taking, there were prolonged spells, especially along the central parts. Rajasthan, MP, Vidarbha, Odisha, all these areas, especially the central parts, it was experiencing heat wave to severe heat wave condition in this year. It is increasing. As we know very well that there is an increase in the average temperature of the globe. So that we tell it as global warming. So that impact is seen over India also, and along with that the heat wave especially, that is also showing a increase, and that is also taking lot of toll that is happening. So these all has to be taken into consideration. These are the major disasters I am telling. Other than small things are there, but these are the major things. So if we are talking about that early warning system, our major work is this disaster risk reduction. Major work is early warning, and another part is capacity building also. Capacity building of the region, not only national, it is international. We are extending our service to South Asia, other countries also. So if we talk about the forecasting organization of IMD, we are having a National Weather Forecasting Center at IMD New Delhi. This is there, and disaster risk means we have to deal with the disaster managers of the different locations. So in that, we cannot do everything from the center. One national level we can also. We are having another 6 regional centers located at Delhi. Delhi is having a regional center also, which is looking after the northwest India part. Mumbai is looking after the western part of the country. Nagpur is central parts. Then Calcutta is taking the eastern part of the country, and Guwahati northeast. Chennai is taking the southern part. So this way our center is there. In addition to that, we are having each state capital is having a state meteorological center also.
So I have taken the topic from the theme of this workshop. I put the technological word seismic microgeneration, a pathway for earthquake risk resiliency of the South Asia. If you remove the word earthquake, then the question arises, how do you achieve the risk resiliency of the system, of the infrastructures, of the structures? That means there is no other way to find out that what could be the modalities and the technology adopted to make the structure, the risk resilient with respect to the any sort of the natural disaster. That is the crux of here. And I think the almost all technology, the geophysical parameters, geological parameters, seismological parameters, and the parameters related to the soil geomechanical strength is give you idea what type of the structure should be, and what could be its capacity, or what could be its ability to withstand the impact of the shaking, whether it is the hydrostatic pressure, or whether it is the earthquake shaking, or whether it is the impact due to explosion or due to any type of the landslides and any type of the natural or man-made disasters. So of course it is shaking. Somebody is staying in the mining areas, in the coal mines, in running a coal field where I studied, and it was my you can say that majority of the time is spent. There is the vibrations of the building, even the coal mines, if there is the blasting. So I have taken a topic in this sense that South Asia is the most disaster prone country. It is called like at the hottest spot of almost all disasters. It has the earthquake, it has the landslide, it has the storm surge, it has the biological related disasters, it has the climate induced disasters, so many disasters occurring in the South Asia. And India is one of the best laboratory for that. So if you see that the disaster impact will be dictated by the vulnerability profile or the disaster profile of the region. And it is really, if you see all the 1970 2018, you can see that how many disasters occur. More than 1350, means 1350 disasters have happened, and millions of the people died, and millions and the billions of the property damaged. It is the largest, youngest and seismic active mountains of the country, of the region. The glacials, the deposits melting is taking place because of climate change. So many things happens. There is a recurrence flood, and we are suffering. The India is suffering a recurrence flood. We have not a risk resilient structures to withstand the impact of the flood, right? There could be embankment. There could be embankment is there, but the buildings are not sustainable to withstand the thrust of the hydrostatic pressure due to the river or due to the whatever the flooding coming place, whether it in the urban area or in the riverine sites, or even in the urban area or the rural area. There is no any way to withstand the structures. and the drought is taking place. So I'm not going to touch the hydrometeorological disaster because my predecessors have already spoken in detail. I will speak on this that 23% of the world population, South produces 1.5% of the world income. And the report exactly says that how poor we are. That means the economical vulnerability is there. 40% of the world poor lives in the South Asia, and 46% of illiterates also there. So whatever technology we are going to tell them, they are not incapable to accept or grasp them or implement them because of the level of the illiteracy. So the question here that there is also a lot of the population's gender discrimination there. So there is no equal participations of the each and every ingredients of the society, and therefore there was a lot of the there is a lot of the urbanizations because of the rapid population going on. But these rapid populations lead to unscientific and haphazard urbanization, and that is the main crux of the problem. That we want to urbanize, we want to make our life prosperous, but we have no plan. And if there is no planned haphazard, then we are adding or we are augmenting the degree of the disaster more and more. So we want to see that what could be there. So this is the regional effect, and rightly said by our previous speakers that most of the disaster, particularly storm surge, floods, and the earthquake, these are the transboundary earth. This was transboundary disaster events. They never respect any geographical boundary of that. So I would go to just to understand that if this is going on so many changes, then what could be the way to find out? And India, I told you that India is the one representing that 25.6% of the total urban population in the country, and 57.1% of the total area of the India is the seismically in prone zone, that is 3, 4 and 5. You can understand. And its intensity of the zone 3 is 7, 8 and 9 to 4 and 5 zone. So this says that the gravity of the problem, that if you don't have a proper infrastructures, then what could be there in the future? You see the 2030, we are going to exceed and surpass among all the South Asian countries. This is very beautiful correlation you can see. This is the all the pyramids for the India in 2030. The population will be going where? And for Bangladesh, it is also in the rising trend. Pakistan is also rising trend. Other countries like Maldives, Bhutan, Nepal, these are a very nominal changes there. So we are at the brink of the disaster. If you don't able to adopt it, you don't able to implement it. But here I differ that the previous speaker says that technology is there, it's not a solution. It is a technology who can find out that what are the factors and what are the causative factors that is going to impact in the future. Technology can be able to find out the truth, and technology can be able to give the solution. So technology, without technology you cannot do that. But in order to adopt the technology, the proper level of the understanding should be there. So what are the causative factors to cause so much damage? Did you think about that? This is nothing but it is a huge amount of the energy generated by all disaster effects. This is equal to, I made a very unique correlations that if you take the explosives and if you take the earthquake of magnitude, even if it's 0, if 0 magnitude, it has also the 10 to the power 6 because it is moment release. Okay, it is a logarithmic scale, 0, -1, -2, magnitude go to the negative level also. Suppose it is the very imperceptible earthquake, magnitude 2, it corresponds to 10 kg of the explosive that is used in the oil explorations. Similarly, if you go to the Tangshan earthquake 7.8 of the China, its amount is about 450,000 actually ton of the explosives. So it is a huge amount of the energy either generated to the tectonic forces or generated to the hydrostatic pressure or generated to the any natural disastrous processes that cause the disasters. So if this is there, then the question is equal to arises that how could you do it? Can you predict almost all natural disaster effects? If you can tell that, okay, flood can be predicted because it has all the symptoms of secondary and tertiary. We know the level of the water is rising. We know the size of the river. We know what type of how much the rate of the increase of the water flux. But in the earthquake, can we predict that? The question is simple that with present state of knowledge, we cannot predict the earthquake because we don't know the mechanism and don't know the physics of the earthquake genesis. And that is the reason that the forecasting is not possible for the earthquake shaking. And it is the most generating energy. If you can have a structure of earthquake risk resilient, I am sure that structure will withstand the hydrometeorological disasters also. So that is the actually the important point. So how could you reduce? You can reduce either the predict the phenomena, like in the meteorological phenomena, you can able to predict the storm surge, you can predict the cyclone, you can also predict the monsoon, you can also predict the rainfall. So prediction means prior to occurrence of the event. But earthquake, now the people are telling that it is early warning of the earthquake. This is all the misnomers. If the earthquake occurred, then we can say this is the early warning. Earthquake early warning means you have a pre-occurrence of the earthquake early warning. We don't have, because we don't know that at what type of the stress generation, at what time of the stress generation, at what level of the stress generation the rock is going to get failure. We don't have. So we have not a diagnostic precursors that can able to give you the idea that the earthquake is going to happen. So we can, whatever we can early warning in the earthquake, it is the prior to occurrence of the earthquake is not there, but we have after the occurrence of the earthquake, we have just disastrous phase prediction, because primary wave happened, shaking we felt. Then we can say that secondary wave come, tertiary wave come, then disastrous waves come. So that is the actually the predictions of the post-earthquake occurrence of the earthquake. But the response time is very short. Can we be able to mitigate the degree of the disasters if the response time is very short? If the occurrence of the earthquake is very near to your the installations, that is the challenge. And that's why in uncertainty of the earthquake prediction, in uncertainty of the development of the early warning for the earthquake, we have only one solution, and that is there, that you have to develop the earthquake risk resilient structure. And that is the best engineering and technological solutions available with us.
Indeed, I'm grateful to the chair for this opportunity and also the NIDM. I have certain things I was thinking when the report was rolling down, that what are the take for National Institute of Disaster Management. When we are talking about the changing landscape or riskscape of disasters, what kind of a partnership we need to build, what kind of a strategies which we have to rethink and revisit. And what we found, one very interesting thing is that since IDNDR decade till Sendai framework, initially when this World War happened, Second World War, and that time majority of the literature was based on search and rescue and reconstruction. So heavily engineering dominated literature and heavily military operations, that search and rescue. And for disaster management, where we can say that, assume that this is the beginning of recovery and reconstruction when IBRD was created, the World Bank. And then literature was dominated by that. But gradually, over the years, we have found that many new players are coming into and bringing new literature and knowledge and research in the area of disaster risk management. This is one of the examples which we saw where the UNESCAP brought this information. IDNDR decade, we did not expect UNESCAP working on the disaster risk management and bringing all those kind of social and economic issues. But yes, that entire institutional framework is also changing. Entire institutions' priorities are changing, and when we need to protect our development, we need to discuss about disaster challenges. So this is a compliment to UNESCAP for bringing a new knowledge or information to the dimension of risk management. Many more things could have been added, probably, people are making concerns in the ASEAN Ministerial Conference and other national platforms in India, where people are much more now raising voices for pollution, GLOF, glacier-led disasters, air pollutions, drinking water, and so on and so forth. So what we are saying, that maybe a new dimension would be added for in the times to come for as a risk escape for disaster risk. Second important thing which I would like to mention, that still we are, despite this in the entire region, we found that the data shows that still we are working for the visible disasters which is very, very loud, like flood, tsunami, and also cyclone and earthquake. We hardly find much of attention is being paid for the silent killers like earthquake, which is 60% is the risk which has been highlighted. So invisible risk have to be brought on the floor of discussion, and I'm glad that this report has also brought that. But how NIDM can also re-strategize for bringing many of the capacity building programs related to drought as well. So as we are saying that 60% and then 84% is related to climate induced. Second important thing which we would like to highlight in terms of where these risks are getting accumulated in the region. So accumulation of risk is one, understanding risk is another, risk perception is other. Every sector has different perception of risk. So risk reduction will go accordingly, and then risk communications to the masses. That is very, very important. Many of the things what we have in the app, this our research documents doesn't get percolated down to the people who are at risk. When we are looking at this, that we are talking about so much of disasters impending, which is looming large, and when see who are the people at risk, which are the infrastructures at risk, and report is saying that the poverty ratio versus this, that how it is not allowing poverty to come down in terms of when the frequency of disaster is very, very high. So this is one of the concerns, that how the development partners can be together and changing their own risk perception and bringing those infrastructure which can help in reducing poverty. So poor people, how they will get this information, so that they start working and we can incentivize those who are at risk. If we do not have mechanism, go for a macro ways of risk reduction, can we have a solution as a micro based or micro led solution for incentivizing risk management? For that matter, any individual sector or any individual people who wish to actually go for risk reduction, how government tools and machineries, policy and programs which is actually helping them to go for the risk reduction as an individual basis. So first, this percolation down is one strategy which we need to have as an IDM, that how the risk is percolated down to the last mile, and to the policy level, how we can discuss and dialogue with the different sectoral ministries to see this, that how they can bring them on the floor in terms of risk reduction. Another point which I would like to mention in terms of the drought, which is leading to migration, land fragmentation, high poverty, depletion of natural resources, ecosystem, fodder, livestock, meaning thereby South Asia is a agricultural based economy, and 70 to 80% of the livelihood is based on still agriculture, not much of industrialized. So that is giving insight that how we can protect, like the floods which we are seeing, most of the agriculture product has gone, and this all the vegetables price have gone very high if you go to the market and relate it. So that the damages which has happened across the country. So this has a kind of a very symbiotic relations between this management of risk and also addressing issues like drought and other life and livelihood issues.
I'm Rajit Punhani, CVO NTPC. No, I just had a small comment or more of a query. You're saying, okay, 86% or a high percent is climate induced, but are there any studies which show that how much is affected by climate change? For example, I'm saying in Chennai or in Srinagar, if we have clogged our drainage outlets, then there are bound to be, problems of floods. In North Bihar, my cadre, I've seen that, we have seen floods, as Professor Santosh pointed out, we have seen floods for decades. So, are there any studies which show that climate change has made us more disaster prone? Are there any scientific studies to show that? Thank you.
I am Dr. Parvez Hayat. It's not a question, rather it is a suggestion that the report, I do not know, I have not gone deep into the report, whether it is talking about the way forward, like we talk about the lot of issues, like tech-driven approach of solving the disaster mitigation. But we still feel that in the case of the coastal areas, our forefathers, the old people, how do they tackle the storm surges and what measures, what traditional measures. So my suggestion is that in the report I have not seen that there should be a hybrid methodology, approach. When you see in the coastal areas, people, even they are, mangroves and etc., and they're putting up the dikes. At the same time, the technology is helping to put up the like stone structures. So there should be a hybrid approach instead of only talking about the tech-driven approach in disaster mitigation and approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I think they're all very good points. First of all, the clarification about poverty reduction in Pakistan. I think, the initial condition, the starting point of poverty rates in Pakistan, and here we are talking of extreme poverty, the $1.9 a day poverty rate, which is the target for the UN SDG goals, the goal 1, that should be eliminated by 2030. Pakistan's rate is at this moment lower than India's, so because they have inherited a more fertile region of India, and the poorer part earlier, which is now Bangladesh. Altogether, when it was part of one country, they were below Indian average, but the western part, Western Pakistan, because of higher fertility and all that, and Punjab forms, as you know, the Pakistan Punjab is very much of a bulk of the country. So compared to India, I mean, in India's poverty rate is about 21%, and the extreme poverty I am talking. In there it is 11. So for them to go down to by 2030, 100% is possible. But with disasters, they won't be able to make it, because they are also facing a lot of disasters, the flooding and all that. So that is the one message. And of course, as you know, the poverty measurement is also sometimes questioned, how you measure that. And so the point from your side, sir, about the whether there are studies establishing causation between climate change and these disasters. There is a lot of evidence in the report, actually. And Mr. Kamal Kishore picked up one point about this Kerala floods, etc. It happened once in this century, last year's Kerala flood. So firstly, the frequency and the intensity both are increasing because of the climate change related developments. But the point is well taken. What you are making is that if you don't manage it, of course, it becomes much more devastating. I mean, if you don't clear the drains and we don't invest in the, erecting dams, etc. So the virility of these become much more intense. And the point made about coastal areas management, I think, is very well taken. And finally, your point about empowerment and the transformative aspects of the SDGs, they are covered in the report in much greater detail than in this executive summary. But there is a lot of other material coming out of ASCAP on SDGs per se, which go deeper into the transformative aspects of SDGs and inclusion and empowerment, etc. So you will find a lot of material at this website, www.unscap.org. You can, and the detailed version of the report is also there. Yeah. Thank you.
Give a broader picture actually, and this kind of discussion, open discussion on these issues, they also clarify many things to us in our own country, and how to when we are seeing a Asia or South Asia, then we get more clarity actually how to go about it. We know that the South Asia is vulnerable for all kind of disasters, but because now climate change, and I think there is no research required and no proof is required that climate change is playing very important role in climate-induced natural disasters, and the frequency, impact, is increasing. 2 days ago in the newspaper it was there that in 18 days there were more than 1,200 extreme weather events which has happened. And you see the cloud burst, you see the thunder, lightning and all that, and the number of deaths. So on one side we are making efforts to reduce mortality and as per the Sydney framework we are trying to reduce mortality and we are working on it. And on the same side the vulnerability is increasing, and you can see the report that it's not only in this country but in the whole South Asia. This is the scenario. So I think this is very important information. And now what is the solution basically? We are doing a lot. In this country, I think in case we compare ourselves with other countries, I think we are happy on one side that we start from the top. You have NDMA, which is headed by Honorable Prime Minister. We have SDMAs, which is headed by Honorable Chief Ministers of every state. But where is the gap basically? And we see that at district level, we are very weak. The district disaster management authorities which are there, they are not that functional. Functional in the sense that the inputs which are required, they are not going to them, they are not taking it that seriously. Some of them they are taking, and you see the results that they can reduce mortality to zero. So, but the most critical thing which because I am working in one very small state, and we did this experiment that we have gone up to the community level. And in community we are giving training to panchayats. And out of 176 panchayats, we have trained 16. And these 16 panchayats, we are making model panchayat, giving them equipment, this, that, So response, that how immediate response, they can provide. So I think this is one way we can, change, that community level efforts can be increased, and more training can be given to the community and community-based organizations, strengthening of non-governmental organizations, academic institutions. So I think this is one way to reduce, risk, because it is increasing. There is no doubt in it. Infrastructure, I think, very important point you have said, but India is doing a lot. I'm not talking about South Asia, but we are doing a lot. And in case you see our investment in health sector, investment in education, investment in, So I think we are very happy that we are on the right track. And this will definitely, it will not be immediately, but you will see that after a few years, there will be impact of this. The national programs which are started by Government of India. So definitely, and then the investment in science and technology. I think this is again very important. And India, you have seen 2 presentations. I think you will be impressed, that the way IMD, Central Water Commission, all these organizations, earth sciences, they are working in this country. So we are next to none. But the important thing is that this scientific knowledge, information, how we can use it basically for saving community. The second thing is that we should not concentrate only on response. I think the money which we are spending today on response and rehabilitation, and because you see the loss, I think the figure is very clear because it's going up. So I think as far as you have given solution also, that in case we spend more on preparedness, on mitigation, on these measures, then this loss will be minimized. And then it will be just like other countries or Western countries, that it can be stabilized. And Mr. Kamal Kishore was mentioning about infrastructure. And he is right that we are investing a lot, but it is not resilient infrastructure, which Honorable Prime Minister is talking about. But I think we will have to understand this point. What is resilient infrastructure? Again, there is technology use is there. Again, there is use of this thing. Then the new challenges which are coming to this country and to the whole South Asia. And these new challenges, you have mentioned in your report, we are just talking about flood and drought, which we know that water-related hazards, and particularly these two, they are the major one, and we should focus on these two. Slow onset disaster, drought, you have already shown that how much loss is there. India is the same, we know it that how much loss we are getting, from drought. But nowadays there are 2-3 other disasters which are coming. That is forest fire, for example. Heat wave, Madam was mentioning. Thunder lightning, the death which is there from thunder lightning, it is almost 1/4 from as in the floods. It never happened. It never crossed 100, but this time it is more than 300 people died in thunder lightning. And last, there is the gulf, which Professor Santosh Kumar was also mentioning. In the entire Himalaya, I think our problem is going to be the gulf. And this will be a new disaster for which we should be prepared. So I think these are some of the things but I am glad that this discussion, this has raised, so many issues. Brigadier Datta was mentioning about data, how, in fact, every researcher take different parameters and we do different calculations. So that is a different part. But I think this kind of discussion is required. We should talk at national level. We should see that what is going on at SAARC level in South Asia, and definitely will be. This discussion was of much use for me, and I'm sure for all of you. So thank you very much. Thanks for panelists. That each panelist gave a very good presentation, I should say. Thanks to NIDM, for organizing this wonderful event and asking me, to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Sharma, the Honorable Vice Chairman of the Sikkim State Disaster Authority, who has given his remark as a closing of this particular session. And we are indeed grateful to you for giving insights, for taking this agenda forward. When we are sitting here, everybody would expect after this report what next? So that is every organization and department and sectors who are representing, they must be thinking on those lines. So I thought it would be unfair if we do not request the NIDM for saying that how NIDM thinks for taking it forward from here, and then we will close after that by giving a memento to our panelists by him, but I would request ED and IDM to kindly address in terms of from here what next.
Thank you, Professor Santosh Kumar. We had nearly 2.5 hours of discussion today for this workshop. And I firmly believe that every workshop or a discussion should lead to some implementable thought process, some key action points which we need to take it forward. Otherwise, we can keep going from one workshop to another and keep discussing the same thing till the cows come home. So, keeping that in mind, what I think and I propose is that this particular study has given us a lot of insight into things which are pan Asia Pacific, which are beyond our boundaries, and which have a lot of effect on each other, impact on each other's capabilities. So, I will propose that we have a small working group which studies this report with UNESCAP, and then we come out with an action plan, and that action plan should be such that it can be implemented throughout the Asia Pacific region. So that is a project we will work with UNESCAP after this. This was the start point of the whole thing. Second, if anyone who is in the audience or who will be seeing it on the YouTube or the Facebook, who are listening to it, who's having some good thought process in this particular field, is free to contact us so that we can, if required, engage them for this project. And I would say that in next about 4 to 6 months, we should come out with a good document which further takes this agenda forward. With that, I will close this particular workshop, and I thank each and every participant, each and every speaker, and a special thanks to Professor V.K. Sharma for taking on the chair at the last moment, because Mr. Kamal Kishore had to go because of some official engagement, which was not planned earlier. Thank you so much, sir. And thank you to all the panelists. Now I request Rajiv Pankaj.
So request to NIDM to kindly facilitate the panelists and the chair with the momentum. Okay. Professor V.K. Sharma to kindly facilitate the ED and IDM, who has taken this entire initiative. So now it is my privilege to convey my heartfelt thanks on behalf of the National Institute of Disaster Management to the chair, Professor V.K. Sharma, and all the panelists, and our gratitude to UNESCAP for bringing this partnership together and sharing this report with the august audience here. And I'm sure with this partnership, as we said, that the working group has been announced already by Indian IDM, and I'm sure that UNESCAP will further nurture this partnership and collaborative efforts for bringing many national learning from different parts of the country and taking it to the Asia Pacific also. And we can also bring online their expertise in this particular report. So this is a good end with a good beginning, which we say on this report. So on behalf of National Institute of Disaster Management and the faculty, I extend my heartfelt thanks to the Executive Director of National Institute of NIDM, the faculty members, and especially we have all the distinguished faculty members here. Mr. Vikram Gujjar is here, who has been facilitating the entire logistics that it should go well. Our cameraman, our IT department, and Mr. Shekhar Chaturvedi, who is co-partnering with us as a organizing members. Geeta, Dr. Zindawalia, Mr. Amir Ali Khan, Shushma, Dr. Gupta, Chandrani, and Rituraj. So once again, big hands to everyone, and I would request to our distinguished delegates. Without that, this could not have been possible. So biggest loud applause for our delegates.